Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Radious Total War for Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. What I want to talk about in this video is Bretonia. Fair Bretonia. Is it better than the base game? Absolutely. Does it fix every issue that Bretonia has in the base game? Not quite so. I gotta say, the unit cards are pretty damn nice. I certainly do appreciate it. Though I admit this style of UI that a lot of mods use not just Radius, not necessarily my favorite, but that's just, personal perspective. It's just like a lot of things that are very bright, things that pop out. I understand it's popular, but just a perspective on that specific subject. But anyway, I've talked about the many issues of Bretonia, their unit situation, their vow situation, their confederation situation. Some things are absolutely better with Radious Total War, some things are the same. So, let's talk about the big changes, the things that are positive. So, first off, you can individually customize units with Zealotry. So, it's basically the greenskin scrap upgrade, though it is a lot of it. And what you do is you upgrade a unit with a specific upgrade. Though it should be pointed out that with greenskins you can actually choose multiple upgrades nowadays, so maybe that is something that they should be looking at updating with regards to how Bretonia works, with regards to it, and how you actually gain these upgrades, because if I'm not mistaken, you actually do have them from the very beginning. But either way, you do have a lot of Zealotry, and you can spend it on unit upgrades. It is a bit unfortunate that we can't spend it on anything else, because there are absolutely certain things that Bretonia could do with this vast mountain of resources that you have through Zealotry. Though, bear in mind, this is turn 20, and I've been fighting quite a few factions. I've dealt with Grom, I've dealt with Kemmler, I've dealt with Norska, I've dealt with Bellicor. Well, to a degree. So keep that aspect in mind, though I've certainly gained a good amount of Zealotry as well. Another thing to be mentioned with regards to Bretonia is some of the substantial unit and building changes that they've added. So, for instance, Bretonian infantry is no longer a worthless pile of crap. I mean, to be certain, Bretonian infantry is not going to compare to other races, but at least they're worth recruiting. Especially when you start looking at Tier 2 infantry. Tier 1 infantry, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but Tier 2 infantry, Tier 2 units, you get crossbow brigands, you get Bretonian macemen, you have a variety of units that are very, very good over here with regards to Bretonian infantry and range units. There are, of course, going to be some downsides with regards to this. So, trebuchets. So, Blessed Field trebuchets, Tier 4. Regular Field trebuchets, Tier 3. I don't think they should be Tier 3. I think they should be Tier 2. But that is where I stand on that particular subject. And then we still have the base game situation where you can only recruit Knights Errant at Tier 2. I think they should be a Tier 1 unit, and then things like Knights of the Realm and Questing Knights should be Tier 2. That is my perspective. I understand a lot of mods do have this specific tendency of going with it, but what this does really, though, is it encourages you when you're playing a Bretonian campaign with Radius to actually use the infantry roster. And funnily enough, Battle Pilgrims I would say, are significantly less useful in this than other infantry units. And on top of that, you do even have, like, Foot Squires are a Tier 3 unit. You get Dismounted Knights of the Realm, as well, Dismounted Grail Knights. So, Dismounted Knights, imagine if Creative Assembly actually, God forbid, did something like that. But it goes even further, because you also have elite units that are only available if you build the smithy. So, for instance, you get Chevalier Ramparts with spears and with great axes, but on top of that, there's also certain units, I believe, like everything that's King Royal will require a smithy. So if you want to recruit those kind of units, you will require a smithy in your campaign, in your settlement, in order to to be able to get them. And then, of course, you do also have, Grail Chapel over here in order to unlock recruitment. Now, I'm usually not fond of requiring buildings to unlock units, but here's the thing. There are a lot of units that you can recruit by default in a campaign like this. Generally, the reason I dislike requiring buildings for the recruitment of certain units is because the baseline unit roster is limited. Here, it's not so limited for a Bretonian campaign. So, you end up with a far wider variety of units, and of course, because of Radius's inherent upkeep benefits and economic benefits, if you will end up with substantially more armies than you would in the base game. And here's another thing to also mention on this subject. When you're playing with a mod like this, with Radius, you don't just create a situation where your own faction is stronger. It also creates a situation where a lot of Bretonian factions, or all of them, are significantly more stronger and more useful as well. So, for instance, Bastan over here, yes, I had to help them with the dwarves, but they do at least have some useful units. Artois! Yes, fucking Artois is invading Norska. Artois. Usually, even if you save them from Kemler, Artois ends up doing nothing. Now, again, their armies are not the best, but they're substantially more useful than they are in the base game. Furthermore, economic situation. You no longer require 2 structures in order to unlock the higher tier for the landed estates or the tailors. Generally speaking, I do obviously go with landed estate. It's more money, but there's of course some benefits with regards to industry. The income modifier from the water wheel has been reduced, but keep in mind you will generally have a lot more money. So that is a far greater benefit. I mean, you might get the water wheel for the sake of control or growth if you want to, as well as local recruitment capacity, if that's your thing, or you would go with the industrial building, the storehouse, for campaign movement range and attrition when under siege. Though personally, I don't really care about that because I don't necessarily end up under a lot of sieges. So all of that is great from a building standpoint. Bretonia is still pretty bad as a campaign area. Now, so those things are good. You also have a new lore type, though we don't have an extra hero. So the hero situation is still the baseline 1, Paladin and Damn Souls. They haven't even changed the skill lines, really, I think, for them. Except, like, you're just adding these, you get double skill points, but yeah, that's kind of it. But you also now have the Hermit Knight. Now, the Hermit Knight is a bit different than a regular Lord of Bretonia in comparison. So if we look at a regular Lord of Bretonia, cavalry benefits, all that kind of stuff, right? For them. Some special skill line for the lords, but not really the heroes. But if we look at the Hermit Knight, he's ridiculously good at debuffing or buffing your army against certain opponents. You can also be unbreakable. So you can give yourself spell resistance, reduce the morale of undead, for instance, as an example. So there are those kind of benefits and different skill lines over here altogether. They're kind of useful. They do have their own benefits, though, funnily enough, they actually don't start on a horse. And unlike regular, and so they get that later, and they don't get Hippogriff mount. So maybe, regular Lords of Bretonia would be more useful versus, Hermit Knights. But all the same, like, Bretonian Lords, probably more useful on that amount, but these guys are just much, much better in combat by default on foot. They're better duelists. That's probably a way to view them. Okay, so those are the kind of good changes. What exactly have they not changed? Well, for instance, Lewin's quest battle could have been better. He does get a lot more benefits than just campaign range and leadership RSIs. He gets missile resistance for lords and embedded heroes, charge for night units, missile resistance, melee defense, etc. And Lewin in general ends up being a far more useful lord than he is in the base game. For a number of reasons, really. But of course, he's not necessarily where he should. You unfortunately do still have the shitty vow system. It's like, oh, unlock all of this micromanagement. There is a mod you can use that automatically unlocks vows once your lords and heroes get to a certain level. I'm not sure it would work with the Hermit Knights. Maybe there's a sub-mod for that or something like that. But you could use that. I recommend using that. So that's one thing. Wish it was better. I think vows are a shitty system. I think that just inherently, if there's an idea for mod makers, it's like, remove this crap. Like, seriously, it's a crap system. Just automatically unlock them as you level up. Another thing to be said is Confederation of Bretonia. That's still the same. The minor Bretonia factions are going to be more useful. But here's an idea. We have all that fucking Zealotry. So how about instead of wasting our time and turns and all that for us to unlock all of these fucking confederations, you allow us to just spend one turn researching whatever faction we want. Not in this shitty order, but yeah, revamp the research rate. Allow us to confederate whichever faction we want for like 400 Zealotry. Maybe it increases the more you get, right? In a campaign, but let's say 400 Zealotry, that would be really good. So that would mean these minor factions are actually worth a shit to keep alive. Though, bear in mind, when you confederate, you either pay a lot of money or you pay chivalry or do nothing and then confederate them for diplomacy later on, but because that's the requirement. Or honestly, just remove the fucking requirement to research and just allow us to confederate them for diplomacy. It would be a much better fucking system. I would say that much with regards to Bretonia. You do have a lot more peasants to the economy. This is one of the great things about Radius, is that you have a lot of these annoying limits early on being removed. So you will have a far bigger peasant economy. So while it obviously renders the peasant economy completely useless, though, keep in mind, you will have more armies. So you might actually care about the peasant economy in the long term in a way that you never do in the fucking base game. That's definitely a thing to take into consideration. So some of those things to be said with regards to Bretonia. And then, of course, the whole chivalry system is just garbage and worthless. Errantry wars are worthless. The problem is the tiers, it takes too long to unlock things for the chivalry meter. And by the time you unlock them, your campaign is over. Like, here's the problem I kind of have with mods. And this is not against Radius, this is just a general fucking mod situation. The people designing those mods, they obviously have their communities on Discord and they follow Reddit and all that. The problem is that Reddit and Discord and all those things are a bunch of people who, like, they think it's fine to design a campaign around 200 fucking turns. Let me give you an idea. Vast majority of the player base does not play a 100-turn campaign. They play an 80-turn campaign. So in that sense, having a system where you unlock questing vows for all your lords at 8,000 chivalry is worthless in a Bretonian campaign. So I would just lower the damn tiers over here. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, I would lower the tier for honorable, for instance. You get that with the maybe 500 chivalry and get the Green Knight. Yeah, I would just lower the tier requirements, maybe give long-term benefits. But yeah, give me the damn questing vow. Now, granted, you know, it's kind of weird because I just noticed here because you do get the questing vow at 6,000. Oh yeah, 6,000 is fucking amazing. Like, I'm 20 turns in. I fought a lot of fucking battles. I'm not going to get to 6,000 by the time you end it. I've done 10,000 chivalry campaigns as Bretonia. It takes a fuck ton of time to do it, and by the time you get to even 1,000, you're long over. There is no universe in the world in which you're ever going to get this worthwhile. So reduce it in half. I'm not joking. Reduce these requirements in half. From 2,000 to 1,000. From 4,000 to 2,000. It would be more useful. Hell, I would even go in so far as to say reduce it by a third, including for the final quest battles. That would be my perspective on what they could do with Bretonia. I also believe quite firmly with regards to the Bretonian Knights. I do appreciate the fact we can get multiple regiments renowned with Radius, right? So it's like we don't just have one, we have 3. That's great. That's how it should work. Maybe cooldown should be a bit lower because, you know, make them a bit more useful as opposed to wasting 10 turns, but still. But one of the things I would really like with Knights, and I think it makes more sense than the scrap system. Like, scrap can work for peasants, but for Knights, I think a system of the warband upgrade, like you start with Knights Errant and you can upgrade them. I mean, you should still be able to recruit them. Also, just in general, the tiers should be reduced by 1, at least for the Knights, right? Knights Errant should be a tier 1 unit. Grail Knights and all that royal should be tier 4. Again, this is how people play campaigns. Like, you look at Chaos Warriors, you look at Khorne, you look at Empire, their cavalry units are more widely available. That's one of the reasons those factions actually have better cavalry than freaking Bretonia in a campaign. For what it is worth, it is a much better campaign experience than the base game. But yeah, also heroes, especially special skill lines, would be in order. But that's where I stand on Bretonia with the Radious Total War Mod. Again, a much better experience. But still, those kind of issues that do carry over. That's all I had to say. Christine signing out.